Alrighty, here we go on a new React video for Diablo news. Let's go.
Alright, so we got a lot of news coming for Diablo 4, including a brand new interview with the game's director on queues, class balance, dungeon design, and a lot more thanks to Eurogamer. Also, a better look at what to expect in the open beta dropping in a couple more days, including fixes, so let's dive right in. But Diablo 4's hype level is off the charts. We've
Play up to level 25. Was this just the open beta announcements? Necromancer Druid coming in on the open beta itself. Dude, Ashaba. I didn't get to do Ashaba this past weekend, so that's definitely something I'm gonna try to do on Saturday.
seen over 1 million players confirmed for the early
I got
access
that,
alone, which is
baby!
quite wild to think about, as this
Beauty.
is just for the hardcore peeps who already bought the game or paid for the codes. And it looks like for Blizzard, they've achieved what they wanted, which was to stress test the servers so that they can better prepare for when the game truly.
That's one thing. First day, I remember on Friday, I kept getting kicked out of the servers, and then on Saturday, it evened out. Like, I didn't get kicked out at all on Saturday, so they did a great job at adjusting the server on day 2. And if you hear me whistling, I just want to say sorry ahead of time. I have asthma, and I just came back from coaching, so pardon my whizzing.
It comes out. According to Rod Ferguson, general manager for Diablo 4, there have been a number of big fixes over the past weekend that specifically address the long queue times and server instabilities.
Yep.
Furthermore, this
They
was
did a
a
great
way
job
for
of
them
that.
to prepare for the likely much larger open beta coming up, and then finally the release day, so that any issues found now will be a lot smoother at launch.
I mean, that would be pretty interesting because when the open beta comes up, what multiplier do you apply on the player base from the first weekend? Is it times 10, times 20? So for example, if you had 100,000 the first weekend, are you gonna have over 1 million on the open beta weekend? I mean, hopefully it's true what they're saying, and they're anticipating that from their previous experience, right? And we're not gonna have the Friday that we had in the early access one.
And indeed, that's what I noticed too, especially in the final early access day. I noticed that queues were pretty much completely gone and stability was much better
I had the
compared to
same
Friday
experience.
night when it all started. So if any issues arise this Friday, expect them to be fixed really soon after. Of course, the good news here is that Blizzard doesn't want these queues either, and ideally on launch day there won't be any, so the plan here is for us to just be able to log in and play right away.
And that's where the open beta is going to be really, really important for them. If they can have a foreshadowing of how many people are going to log in day 1, the open beta weekend, that Friday, that's going to be the data that they need to make sure that day 1 we're not dealing with these issues.
However, they also talked about the Butcher encounter and some of the other stuff.
Dude, I didn't get this guy.
Really interesting, especially this one, which was one of the highlights of the beta. Actually, something I like to see more of, and it looks like Blizzard is totally on board with adding more of these encounters.
Dude, that looks so fun. Let me know in the comments if you got to fight him, because I didn't see him at all, man. What is he, 25? Boss 25? Dude, that would have been hella cool if I got to freaking face that guy.
In Diablo 4. So according to the game's director, Joe Shelley, one of the things that can be really fun is changing up the player's goal at any given moment, and the treasure goblin does that by running off with a pile of loot that you really want, so you're likely to opt into the extra danger to get it. And the butcher does that by ambushing you and creating a situation where you're likely to run potentially into other dangers or navigate under pressure. So broadly speaking, in Diablo 4 we're looking for other ways to add that kind of gameplay that changes the player's experience on the fly.
If everything the dev said is true, that is freaking beautiful. Imagine this random scenario. You're traversing the world and you see a loot goblin, you chase him, and then you turn a corner and there's 2 of his mother effers waiting for you on the other side. Like, something like that would be fucking beautiful. But also, just in general, having those random encounters to keep you logged in, paying attention, and truly immersing the world where oh, something random happened. Let's kick this dude's butt, get all the loot. And that can happen while in your mind you were running to a dungeon, you were running to a quest. That being able to kind of click off of your original path, have that experience, and then jump into whatever it is that you were doing previously. I mean, RPGs are known for that. Some RPGs do that too well, to the point where there's some stories out there that I haven't finished because I keep getting sidetracked in games with Skyrim, freaking Breath of the Wild, etc. But if they manage to truly get that, I mean, it's gonna be freaking amazing.
We want to add more things like that in the
Yes.
future as well, end of quote. They did clarify there is indeed a minimum level restriction for the spawn, though they did not specifically mention it, plus a few other conditions on top.
I mean, it makes
Mostly
sense.
this is meant to be a very random and
You don't want to be level 15, have this guy come out at level 25 and one hit you. That will actually be counterproductive. So the fact that you trigger it once you become that level 25, that's effing beautiful.
very unexpected encounter. And I'm not sure about you, but I really loved the encounter and was lucky enough to get it a handful of times over the first weekend. It was a blast for sure, but also a bit scary at first when I was under-equipped for it clearly. It's like the first time you're almost guaranteed to die because of how unexpected it is and
Legendary
how early
ring.
it can be in your progression. Meanwhile, it's a lot more satisfying when you get your revenge a bit later once you got a build going and got some better items. I think having more randomness like this in the game can definitely help a ton, especially if it ends up being as rewarding as the Butcher or the Loot Goblins indeed are. But for me,
I
it's
absolutely
always
agree.
because it lets me test my builds better if the unexpected does indeed happen. Totally let me know.
And especially for single target builds, like my rogue, it's not so good at handling mobs, but I completely melted the bosses because of how I was building the particular character. So with one enemy like that, you know, like the butcher that comes out and truly lets you to not necessarily experiment with your build, but at least test out its responsiveness for something as random as that.
Down below in the comments if you did encounter this and if at any point did you die during this boss fight. Another interesting subject they touched on, we all know of it, the feedback on the dungeon design was a bit of a mixed bag for a lot.
There was a lot of complaining online about the dungeon diversity. I think we spoke of it on the previous video on this channel. Does that many dungeons look pretty the same? I don't understand it because we're in the first zone, but we'll see if they address it.
Of players, and even I voiced my concerns about it feeling a bit samey after a while, especially with a lot of backtracking to grab keys and other similar objectives to unlock the boss doors. Well, it seems that a lot of that is here to stay, unfortunately, and it is made by design. So according to the game's director, again, certainly there are cases within the dungeons where you're going to get a key and then you're going to have to go somewhere else. In cases where you're going to get a key and you're running back through an area, there should be enemies that are showing up to refresh that. According to him, it's the company's goal so that players never have to run through an empty dungeon basically ever, though if we take a look at the beta, obviously that's not always the case. There were many occasions when you would clear a dungeon only to have to backtrack to grab a bunch of keys or maybe some of those objects.
That happened to me once, only once, where in the dungeon the path diverged. I went right, and he swung me across the dungeon all the way to the end. And when I got to the end, the door wasn't open because I forgot to turn left all the way back here and get the little mob that was sitting at the end of this tunnel. That's annoying. That is really annoying, having to run all the way back just because it was the type of dungeon where you have to clear all the mobs before the door opens for the boss. Yeah, I didn't enjoy that at all.
To open up doors which had you run through rooms.
But in games, there has to be a degree of player responsibility. If I understand dungeons work in that style, I should have paid more attention to the map and make sure that I'm clearing all the corners, like walking around the perimeter and stuff like that. So actually thinking back on it, I should take player responsibility over that instead of saying that I fell victim to the design. I fell victim to me not paying attention. So that's probably way a better way to seeing. And another note on that though, if they bring up a transparent map that you can pop open with tab, that would truly help to navigate the dungeons instead of having to open the whole map, then click out, then proceed.
that were already cleared. Furthermore, he goes on to explain there are well over 100 dungeons in the full game, but in the beta what we're seeing is just a fraction of it,
Yeah,
about 20% of the overworld. One of the design decisions
20%
we
sounds a
made is we
lot.
wanted the
But no,
dungeons
I
and
mean,
individual dungeon to
never mind. I
have
take that back.
certain properties about it that were consistent and tied to that dungeon and that place in the world, so that when you go into it, it's not just drawing out a raffle of all the elements. There are some things about it that are consistent, he mentions. So no, I would not keep any hopes high that anything will be changed in this regard by launch day. Not only is this by design, but there's not even enough time to make such a drastic change.
Yes, but it's not necessarily something that bothers me because they're gonna have 5 zones. Therefore, that diversity of look is something that we will have due to the diversity of zones. So the way I'm thinking this is gonna work, it's gonna be 3 unique looks per zone. That's gonna give us 15 aesthetics that we can sort of, go into. The look itself, I'm not concerned about it at all, but because I do feel we will get enough diversity of look. What I will definitely appreciate will be diversity of system within the dungeon. Give me a dungeon where, not all the time, I have to clear all the mobs and then open the door. Get 2 keys and then open them and open the door. Give me something else. Give me, the ability to run straight to the boss. I don't know, a little mini event in the middle of a dungeon. Just mix it up. I think if they include diversity of play into the dungeons, the system will be perfectly fine, and I don't see why not that will be hard for them to accomplish.
Change up until then. Even more so, from the same interview, it seems that Blizzard are mostly going to address this via the end game mechanics, such as the Nightmare Dungeon modes, in which you're going to be using sigils as modifiers to
That's gonna be fun.
dramatically modify them according to the same.
That's gonna be fun, but if all of the end game is doing nightmare dungeons, this game is not going to survive in the playlist of a lot of players, especially the type of players that are on my realm, which is the casual time player. Because if all you're doing is throwing in the sigil, walking through the 15 variety dungeons that we have, with maybe 4 different game designs to each dungeon run, I mean, that repetitiveness can get really, really old really, really fast. So, endgame Diablo, I kept saying it in the last video, is going to be one of the most important topics once that is fully revealed, and as it continues to be fleshed out through the lifespan of the game, of course. But it better become something solid, either as soon as season 2 or season 3 hits.
Interview. Though players who already played the betas that included that endgame content have already expressed concerns that was not enough either, and these modifiers appeared a lot more superficial than the interview makes it seem. According to one user on Reddit who played through the endgame beta, most of these involved percentage changes to the damage you dealt or received, stat increases or decreases, and monster attacks applying different debuffs such as slow, reduced.
I don't know if you guys play it, but that reminds me a lot of Genshin Impact, the Abyss. The Abyss is sort of like a tower, and each tower, the difficulty becomes higher. But before you go into the next floor, hypothetically of this Abyss, you get a status modifier to either yourself or the monsters of that particular floor. So in Genshin Impact, let's say you get, monsters are gonna do a plus 10% fire damage. I I love the bits in Genshin Impact. I don't necessarily feel that it's totally, game, something that's gonna be a deal breaker if you have that type of modifications. But you definitely, once again, the game here, the key is going to be diversity. Give me plenty of things to do at the end game, or I'm simply not going to log in, because why would I log in to do the same thing I did yesterday? I don't have time for that.
dodge chance, or sometimes exploding upon death. None of which are going to change that experience in any significant way, except maybe adding a layer of difficulty or not on top. If anything, you'll still have to grab the keys, carry pedestals, or kill all enemies in a dungeon before you're able to proceed, no matter what fixes you're getting on them on top.
Hopefully
I've
we
seen
get
other
more.
interesting quick fixes that could in theory work, such as for example the pedestals that you need to return back at the boss door. And the quick fix, according to a user's view, is to allow us to carry multiple of them at the same time. This makes it so that if we run into one object and then find another one before we can drop the original one off, we don't have to backtrack all the way back to it and just like grab them all and bring them back to the boss door, which actually sounds like a pretty good theory, and I'm not sure why it doesn't work, though I'm pretty sure that Blizzard might have an explanation for it, such as it being too heavy to be carried. Or maybe even better, to spice things up, why not make that object to attract a lot of like enemies from around the dungeon and have us swarm with enemies so that we don't have a lonely walk back at the main.
Something you definitely have to be able to mix it up at the end game to where it changes the game style. Either giant waves of difficult to clear monsters that then you have to clear at mid-level boss before you go into, a higher level boss. I don't know. Maybe, I can't even, and this is the difficult thing, sitting here, it's easy to complain about it, but even as I try to think of alternative, my brain is completely blank on it. But I don't get paid to come up with these ideas. They get paid. They are the developers. So you guys figure it out. Please give us some type of diversity.
Objective. I would definitely love to get that, and maybe it's an even nicer way to farm monsters and get the loot and the XP. Another one is for the kill all monsters in the dungeon, which personally I found to be the most annoying, because always I had one or two groups left in some corner of the dungeon that I didn't even know of.
That's what I
So a quick
described
fix
earlier.
suggested here is to get a kill percentage of monster objective instead, kind of like a progress bar, which
Yeah.
actually the game already features. So this will dramatically
Either that, or instead of kill all, kill X number. Kill 100 zombies. Once you're done, the door unlocks. You rush to the door.
reduce the
Something.
risk of backtracking or searching for one or two remaining monsters. And we're seeing other suggestions here. It seems that the general consensus is that these mechanics are boring as they are, and it's just level 25. I cannot imagine what will be by level 100. Even more so, what will happen with some of the other dungeons in the other zones. From the wording, it seems that Blizzard might have different mechanics for them, but even in that case, it might just be like a couple, maybe a handful at most, that we're gonna quickly grow tired of. So yeah, that's how it's going to be moving forward. But in any case, expect more balance changes. And this was one of the more interesting topics they talked about a bit later on. A lot of changes coming to your favorite classes, including buffs and possible nerfs as well. So Joe Shelley goes on to mention that certain things like the Barbarians' Hammer of the Ancients feel a bit underpowered at the moment, while Frost Sorcerers are pretty strong, and I think that's really an understatement.
Frost, I didn't get to try a Frost Sorcerer. I tried a Lightning Sorcerer, and that thing felt OP as a mother effort compared to the Rogue. It's actually the class I'm gonna play day 1 on Friday, and then day 2 I'm gonna play Necromancer. Um, but this seems to be, just to add to it, this seems to be a dev team that is highly responsive and quick to react to player feedback so far. So if they're talking about nerfing and buffing even off of weekend 1, is respectable. Uh but we will have to see. Sometimes you fix one thing and then something else breaks.
Our
We will
clash
have to
also
see.
for the sorcerer is a little weak right now and so on, so expect these to change in the future. Sorcerer definitely felt like the headrunner of the beta in terms of mob clearing potential and like even the boss fights in general, though the rogue wasn't too far off either. What I really appreciate is that they're finally showing some love to barbarians.
Yeah.
This was one of the classes that I leveled up last, but I'm glad I finally did because once I got a build going and reached 25, it got some really interesting concepts in there, like the
Yep.
whirlwind build with the tornadoes is definitely awesome against enemies and looks very satisfying, and I also like the rend plus thorns mechanic against bosses to make them basically slap themselves.
And you have to keep into account that there's going to be a PvP portion of everything we're doing. So if you have a class that is not hitting as hard as the others, for example, the barbarian at early levels, you definitely want to be able to compensate through another source, for example, making him just generally more tanky, etc. For him to be able to go in there, and although it takes a little bit longer to clear mobs and to clear dungeons, once you go into the PvP section of the game, you're gonna be able to self-sustain yourself a lot better than, for example, a rogue or a sorcerer. And then, of course, we're gonna have the whole, shaman and necromancer coming into the mix, which are completely different two classes as well. So the barbarian, right off what I've been hearing, right off from weekend one, the barbarian definitely needs TLC.
To death. However, it's obvious that this is very early character progression and in no way representative of the true endgame when things might change with every single level. Again, giving the Barbarian as an example, this class has access to the most amount of weapons, so endgame wise they'll have the most amount of legendary affixes. Who knows, they might even be the best class of them all, but it might also be different.
And that's the thing as players that we need to. You know what? Let it
Of
finish real
course,
quick.
looking forward to the Druid and Necromancer classes in the following open beta too, so if you want to stay up to date with everything Diablo related, including build guides, totally subscribe and I'll see you guys in the next video.
Nice. So that's the thing with the barbarian itself. Pardon this, let me mute it. The barbarian's gonna be able to attach several legendary artifacts in, because of all the weapons that he's gonna have at his disposal. I don't know the move, but let's take into account because he mentioned it. The one where he's spinning around hitting. Let's say you have 4 weapons, and all of those weapons have a +2 on that ability. That's gonna be a 5 based plus an 8 on that single ability. Like, the barbarian could potentially be freaking nuts and become later on one of the most easiest attack burst classes in Diablo 4 because of things like that, because of combos like that, where you literally just have to span one move to completely decimate either in PvP or PvE. So this is just 1/5 of the game pretty much because of the 5 zones. This is 1/5 of the basic game. This is not even touching any game whatsoever. So if anything, I think we have about 10% of the game right now in the beta, and it's way too early to speculate. The internet, it's always gonna have be negative at front. It is good to question, it is good to suggest, but I actually have hope for this game coming together, especially because of the responsiveness of the dev team and because of the complexity that I'm already seeing sitting here, just after one short weekend of beta. So we're Craze Gaming. I'm gonna put this video in the comments. Make sure you go like and subscribe to this guy. I'm not subscribed. We'll do that right now. And let's read some of the comments. By the end of the beta, this by Lunchboxes88. By the end of the beta, I agree on the Q statement. I never had to wait, but my server stability was way worse. I had a lot more disconnects, stutters, rubber banding, etc. I really hope that this weekend is better. I had that day one at the beginning of day one, and none of it for the rest of the weekend. So I just like him, I truly hope that this gets better. Second one, Phoenix 512. Well, I had a great time this weekend. Loved it. Can't wait to play Yeah, me too. I mean, the Book of the Dead is going to be game changing, in my opinion, when it comes to the Necro class. Truly being able to play around with that. And normally with specialized classes like the Shaman and Necromancer, they tend to be quite broken. It reminds me of Dead Knight from World of Warcraft. You know, new class, specialized class. When they come out, they are completely broken compared to the rest. So we'll see how that goes. We'll read two more. First one, Mr. Surf 5697. I can't believe, or I can't lie, the butcher got me the first 3 times. But once I found him at level 20 plus, I was able to defeat him. I also enjoyed the chaos that came with chasing the loot goblin. I almost died multiple. I got none of that, bro. What the hell? I wanted to see a loot goblin or freaking the butcher. Hopefully we get a chance this coming weekend. Not only that, I'm gonna make sure I get to try out the world boss. Last one, Artiaga 925, badass that they bought the butcher back. He was hard FAF in D1, Diablo 1. I never played D1. I did play Diablo 2, did not play Diablo 3, and now I'm fully committed to Diablo 4. So absolutely, random events like that, it seems everybody is on board with having that and more of it, more diversity. Give us the butcher. Give us freaking, I don't know, the a dead knight. Give us, you know, a clown nightmare. Give them goofy names, but give us all those random bosses so we can fight and so they can disconnect us briefly from the path we are following. Have that little moment, jump back in. That's why ARPGs and RPGs in general are so freaking amazing. That's why I love them, and that's why we love them. That's why, you know, you're watching this video. So that was it for me. Once again, Craze Gaming, thank you for the video. And next time, I'll keep reacting to more videos. Feel free to recommend me some on the comment section. And I'll try and make a few more reactions of my own later on the week. This has been all. Please do like and subscribe for more videos like this in the future. Hanky Dama out!